Rescue teams continue to search for survivors of a devastating 6.8 magnitude earthquake, which killed nearly 3,000 people and left many homeless. The quake is the strongest to hit the North African country and the deadliest in more than 6 decades. Helicopters are being used to evacuate the injured from remote villages. This in the Atlas Mountains, as smaller tremors and aftershocks still rattle the disaster zone. eNCA correspondent Giles Gibson is in Marrakesh at this moment. So let's get the very latest from him right now. And thank you so much, a colleague, for joining us. And I mean, this, devastating earthquake seems to be, further getting worse, just in terms of the numbers that continue to grow. What can you tell us about not only the extent of the damage that it caused, but also those fatalities and those numbers that are currently being recorded?
Well, I can tell you that we are still feeling the aftershocks from that initial earthquake several days after it first struck. I was lying in bed this morning at about 6:30 a.m. and the room just started moving a little bit. Looking into it, that aftershock was, the epicenter of it was to the southwest of Marrakesh. The initial readings suggest that it was 4.6 on the Richter scale, but we're not hearing any reports of any damage as a result of that after tremor. But really, the focus of the search and rescue effort, of the aid effort, is not in Marrakesh. It's in those villages that you mentioned in the high Atlas Mountains that in some cases have just been completely leveled by this earthquake.
Also, when it comes to definitely those rescue efforts, I mean, how they're going, Giles, if you could just update us in terms of any challenges experienced by the rescue teams in terms of their efforts, in terms of not only rescuing but also recovering.
The challenge really throughout much of the search and rescue effort has been access, because many of the roads were blocked or disrupted in some way by that huge earthquake that struck that remote area in the high Atlas Mountains. So initially it was just very difficult to get in a car and actually drive even to some of the villages that were more in the foothills. Over the course of the last few days, they have been able to open up some of those roads. They've been able to set up sort of checkpoints and aid centres and hospitals in many of the larger villages. But even so, some of these villages, even in normal times, don't even have a road to access them. You can only access them by foot or by donkey. And so those are the villages now that are the focus, really, of the helicopters that are being used to evacuate people out there if they need medical attention and, of course, bring in much-needed supplies. But we're also hearing that Moroccans, ordinary villagers, are simply taking matters into their own hands because the aid is not getting through quick enough, and they're using donkeys to bring much-needed supplies from larger villages out into those smaller communities.
And speaking of aid, I mean, at this point, we know that aid has been accepted from certain nations, but definitely rejected from others.
Well, not so much rejected, but what's happened basically is that there was this flood of offers of aid from leaders all around the world. And of course, this happened during the G20 summit. So you had all of these leaders gathered in one place in New Delhi, coming forward and offering support in the immediate hours after the earthquake. Morocco has accepted support from certain partners. So there are teams from the United Kingdom, Spain, Qatar and the United Arab Emirates who are on the ground helping local teams to try to find survivors inside the rubble. But as you say, the Moroccans have been in for some criticism internationally for not accepting all of those offers that they've received. Now, supporters of the government here are saying that they are simply choosing very carefully the partners that they're working with. They are choosing countries that have the exact expertise that they need as they continue the search and rescue effort.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, as we know that, of course, that number of those killed in the earthquake is close to 3,000, 2,800 at this point, over 300,000 people also affected. This being dubbed the worst earthquake to have hit Morocco, and quite devastating. But, of course, search and rescue teams continue to do their best to find survivors amid the challenges. And thank you so much, Giles Gibson, our eNCA correspondent in Marrakesh, for providing us with the very latest.